man, I knew I forgot something. Hey everyone, thanks so much for coming back to the channel. At the end of episode 2, it really bothered me because I thought I had more footage than that, and I kind of felt like I ripped you off a little bit. But then it hit me. I didn't put the footage in of the restoration of the wooden ladders. Now, I'm in no way a woodworker. I did take wood shop in high school, and I have done some work with wood, but I'm not a pro. So here's the footage that should have been in episode 2 of the wooden ladder restoration. So we'll call this episode 2.5. Here it is. Here are the things that you're going to need to restore these ladders. All right, first let's get some gloves on because we're going to be doing a lot of sanding, and eventually we're going to be using oil to restore the wood back to its natural color. Now, I honestly think that somebody had used like a furniture polish or something on this ladder. I don't know if I can keep this in frame or not, but it's definitely darker here, lighter on the bottom than it is up here. I don't know if that's in frame, so please forgive me. There are 4 nails that hold this together. So what we're going to do is we have to gently take those nails out of there because we're going to reuse them again. So all we want to do is just get the corner of the screwdriver under there enough to just lift it out without, almost like that, damaging the wood. And then what we use is this little tiny pry bar. You can get that at your local home improvement store. And we're gently just going to pull these nails up. Now we're kind of going, oh, there we go. Came right out. It's just a little tiny finishing nail, but it's from 1951, so we're going to reuse those. Want to try to keep the original integrity of the ladder as close as we can. That's why I think that sanding these down and just using, we're going to be using Danish oil on these. And I think that just by sanding them down and putting an oil on them versus a stain, I think it's going to give the ladder a much prettier look in the end. Okay, I moved things around a little bit for you. Hopefully you get a better angle on the ladder. We're going to take the 2 sides off and drop the rungs out. Now, but before we do that, we want to make sure of the position of these 2 rungs because these are the ones that had the nails through it. We want to remember which one was where and what way they were facing, so when you put it back together, the nails will drop in. All right, so let's get to it. We're just going to gently, these are not glued. It doesn't appear to be that they're glued. Okay, that side's almost off. And you just want to work one by one until they come. Okay. Now these 2 are kind of insignificant because they're center rungs. They don't have nails through them. But this one here and this one here. Now these are not exactly straight up and down in the holes. And it's a little difficult, but you can see this hole is not perfectly at 12 o'clock. It's more almost at a 1 o'clock position. And same for this nail here. So I'm going to then just work these loose and then work this loose. You could tell these were done on an assembly line because there's no glue. They're just kind of friction fit, and they do come apart with just a little bit of persuasion. So that side is down. And again, we're going to do the same thing here. There's no glue, and you can even see from the wood. I'm going to try to see if I can get a better angle on this for you. I'm just going to do this. If you look, I don't know if you can see this in the frame, but this is bare wood. This is not. That's bare wood. There's no glue or anything on these. So obviously these were just friction fit, and they were put together and then it looked like it might have been oiled or stained at one point in time. I'm not a woodworker, but just by judging and looking at these are two different kinds of wood. This to me, and woodworkers out there, please leave a comment in the description below, or in the comments box, I should say. This to me looks like it could be teak, and these look like they may be pine. I don't think that these are identical pieces of wood. I could be wrong, but that's what we have. Alrighty, let's get to work. We're going to use 120 grit, 220 grit, and then finally 320 grit sandpaper on all the parts to get them nice and smooth, and hopefully there is some couple of little knocks in them. They're not terrible, they're not rotted. So what we're going to do, let's put those two aside. We're going to start with the 120. You're going to need a sanding block, especially on flat surfaces. You don't want to ruin the contour of the wood. This is going to help keep that wood as flat as possible all the way through the process. So we're going to load up the sanding block. We'll move this one aside, focus on this one. And what we're going to do is, with the grain of the wood, we're just going to start sanding off this finish. And we just keep going. Now this coating that's on here is coming off relatively easily. So I don't think it's a varnish or even a stain for that matter. It could have been a wood oil that was used back when this little fire engine was first put together. Look at that, I got frame marks, and you can see the kind of wood underneath there. It's really not as blonde as the other wood. So I'm going to finish this. I'm not going to make you sit through all of this, and I'm going to bring you back when this is all completely sanded with 120 grit. Well, that took longer than expected. That actually, the whole time to get both of these pieces, I'm just going to call this the first cut, the first sanding with 120 grit. That took probably about 25, almost 30 minutes to get them both to this state. And I actually did get the little dents out of them. You might even be able to see some dark spots here from where the dents were. But that's just the first grit of sandpaper that we're going to do. So now it's time to put these aside and then bring in the ladder rungs. And I'm going to show you a trick, something you might have seen in my last video. Here are the rungs to the ladder. Now, I told you at the beginning part of this that you want to make sure that you know the position of the rung and where it was. Okay, so what we have here is, maybe you see that, I took a red Sharpie and put a black line through it. That denotes where that rung goes, because this one is just plain red. And then on the other side has arrows that point, well, there you go, that point up. So I know what position they go in, and I know which end goes into which side, because on the side rails, I corresponded the side rails only on one side with these marks. So I know where these go, on which side, and which direction they have to be facing. Okay, so now how are we going to sand these? If you watched the last video and you saw the video with the bell, we're going to use this. Okay, right about this point, you're probably saying, what the hell is he talking about? All right, so what we're going to do is going to open the chuck all the way up. This is going to go in the end, and it'll go in. Boom. And then when you tighten it up, you're only going to go a couple of clicks. And that's in there good and sturdy. Now, still the same piece of 120 grit sandpaper. Now what we're going to do is gently, you don't want to rip the trigger on the drill. And I'm not pressing very hard on this. I'm just barely letting my fingers lay on the wood. And it's actually getting there. I think that's as far as I really want to go with the 120. So now what we do is we unchuck it, flip it around, And we're going to go after this side. Again, keeping it even though throughout the entire piece. And that is really relatively smooth. So I'm going to get the other 3 done, and then I'll bring you back, because then all the pieces are going to get moved up to 220 grit. Well, there you have it. All 120 grit sanded. I'm about a little less than an hour into the project so far. But the good news is that in theory it should get faster from here, because the bulk of the heavy work has already been done by the 120 grit sandpaper. Everything's been taken off. Dents and divots have been removed. All of the bulk of the heavy stuff is finished, which is the good news. And now we're going to move up to 220 grit with the same process. You see, I told you it was going to be faster. I'm only kidding. But look, something I did notice that I want you guys to take a look at. Remember I told you the wood is different? Look at this piece of wood, and then now look at this piece of wood. I hope you guys could see that. There's a dark streak going through this, like a couple of pieces of wood might have been formed together somehow through mechanical means. It's very, very odd. But nonetheless, this is what we've got to work with. Okay, so now the 220 with the sanding pad is done. So now I'm going to show you how I do the sides. Simply take the sandpaper off the sanding pad. Get that out of there. We're going to fold the sandpaper in half because the sides are not flat. They're rounded off. These are contoured sides. So all I do is just do this while rocking the piece of wood back and forth, going down the length of the strip. You got to be careful. You don't want to sand off too much because you are removing material, and you don't want to take off too much, and you definitely don't want to ruin the piece or ruin the contour. It is getting smoother, and then we'll turn it around. And all we're doing now is just removing the 120 grit sanding lines with 220 grit. Again, I'm not pushing very hard. I'm letting the sandpaper do the work. And that actually looks pretty good. Now we'll flip it over and do this side. And I don't know if you can pick it up on or if the camera's picking it up actually, but it's still taking off some of that dark oil staining that was on there originally. It's still coming off. And that's, oh, there goes that piece of paper towel. Nonetheless, we move on. And then you just keep going. And this is not nearly as lengthy a time as it was when I first took off all of the coating. There's still some little tiny dings in there, but honestly, I don't want to remove too much of the wood because you can see we got a decent sand pile going right now. So we're going to do this. And I could see, and this is another one of the reasons why you go with the grain of the wood. A couple of times in that hyperlapse that you just saw, I went against the grain of the wood kind of at a 45-degree angle. And that was there was some low spots there that I wanted to get out, but I didn't want to go too crazy with the 120. So I figured I would use the 220, get the low spots out, which I did, and not take off too much of the material. And maybe somebody out there is saying, well, why didn't you start with like 80 grit or 100 grit? Well, this wood is really, I mean, you could see it. This wood is super soft. And I was really concerned that if I started with 80 grit, I was really, really afraid I was going to remove too much of the wood, too much material, and that would be disastrous. Plus, 80 grit scratches in wood. It's not like steel. 80 grit scratches in wood man, you could be on those for a while. And if you get too rough with it, it can really put scratches in that you're going to end up using a wood filler to get out. So that's something you really don't want to do. Okay, so now this is all 220'd, but what about the ends? Got to do the ends too. They were really, really rough with the 120. So all I'm doing is holding the sandpaper flat, not pressing very hard, just going in a circular motion and smoothing out the ends. Just like that. These are really, really in good shape. And I was so deeply concerned about possibly ruining them. That's why there would be no power tools coming out on these. Okay, sides 220. Back to the drill and the ladder rungs. And there you go. All right, enough of this silliness with the time lapse. Everything is now 220 sanded, 320. It's the same exact process that I just showed you with the 220. You're going to start with a sanding block. You're going to do the flat sides with the sanding block. Then you're going to do the curved sides by hand to keep the contour. Then you chuck the ladder rungs into the drill and let them all have it with 320 grit. I'm going to do that off camera. I'll bring you back when we're ready to move on to the next step. Okay, got the whole place cleaned up. I think it honestly took me longer to clean up than it actually took to do the 320. It's time to move on to the next step, and that involves this, Danish oil. I was going to use boiled linseed oil until I read the back of the can. Man, I don't even know if I even want to touch that stuff in a Tyvek suit. Grab a can of boiled linseed oil and see what it says on the back. I decided not to. I decided to go with Danish oil. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to move these out of the way, and we'll start with the rungs. I have a microfiber towel. You have to shake this up really good, which I already did off camera, but I'll do it again anyway. Shake it up really good. There is really no odor to this stuff, which is really a plus. And you're just going to put this, get some of the Danish oil on the rag, and you're just going to wipe it down. And they say to wipe it like soak it, because this is going to go into the wood. And what I like about Danish oil is it leaves kind of a sheen, but it's not really a crazy high gloss sheen. And we're going to put 2 coats on this. That looks good. And they say between coats, you only have to wait 15 minutes in between coats for the Danish oil to soak into the wood, which is also a plus. I didn't want to go with a varnish or a color. I really think this wood has character. It tells a story, man. Like, this whole vehicle tells a story from the early 1950s. And I wanted to preserve that as much as I could. Hence why I kept the nails that came out of these holes. So we're going to keep going. That's really nice and soaked. And you can see this first one is already kind of dull. Now here is where I think the surprise is going to come in, because I think that these are a different wood than that. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah. Look at that. Look at the difference. Not so much here, but definitely here. There's a difference in the wood. And maybe that's why they used a non-fast drying oil. Linseed, boiled linseed oil, this kind of oil, these are fast drying oils, and they don't leave a big residue and buildup on the wood, which is also a plus, because some of them can leave a buildup and it actually feels kind of sticky We want to do the ends on this. Make sure that those ends are good. I didn't bother doing the ends on the rungs because they're going to go inside these side pieces, and it really wasn't necessary. Yeah, look at that wood. Man, that wood is beautiful. And like I said, I am not a woodworker. In no way. I'm not even close. I'm not even semi-pro. I'm a garage guy when it comes to wood. I'm a garage guy pretty much when it comes to anything. But we're going to keep going on this, and man, that looks nice. Definitely looks a whole lot better. You can still see some of these little dimples that are in the wood right here. And that's just, you know, when something is this old, you're not going to get it all out. And if you try to get it all out, you might ruin the piece. You don't want to do that. So this has got a good coating on it. Do the ends. Just smush that in there really good. That looks good. Okay, we're going to leave this to set for 15 minutes according to the directions. And here we are 15 minutes later. I've got everything lined up the way it came apart. Now, again, I put reference colors. And down here in this well, I have a red Sharpie and a black mark. In this well, I have only a red Sharpie mark. And, pardon me, on both of them, I have arrows pointing up. So this should, and I preface it with should, go back together exactly the same way it came apart. So what I'm going to do is, these are the nails that came out of it. I'm just going to kind of slide them in to the holes, and I'm going to put these in and kind of give it a little bit of a twist. And look at this. I push the nail in with my thumb. Over here, same thing. I'm going to line it up and give it a little bit of a push. I'm trying to turn it when it's in there. I don't think I have this one lined up properly. And there you go. Boom. In. Then these are kind of really inconsequential. It doesn't matter where they go because there's no nail holes or anything holding them in. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to put the nails back in. And we're going to get these all kind of lined up so we could slide it together. This nail is in not too far. There we go. I'm going to slide it together. Try to keep it square because that's just going to make it go together that much easier. Now with these already pinned, these should go right in. There's one. And there's the other. Just like that. But we're not done yet. Because we want to do is we want to get these nails down. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply not going to take a big hammer or a big mallet. What we're going to do is use a punch. And I'm just going to set it on top and just gently tap. Just to set the nail. You don't want to hit the nail with the hammer because you may miss. And if you miss, guess what you're doing again? That's right. You're going to be sanding out the hammer mark from the wood. And there we go. And that is that. The ladder is done. The rungs, yes, they're a little bit smaller than what they were, but these ladders are decorative. They're not meant for kids to climb on. So it looks beautiful. Square it up a little bit. I think what I'm going to do is I may just, now that it's all completely reassembled, I may just take a little bit of a shot of wood glue and just put a little dab of clear wood glue in all of the rung holes just to make sure they're good and sturdy. But there you have it. Now I'm going to jump on the other one and I'll bring you back in just a flash and both of them are going to be done. feel so much better. Couldn't figure out why that video in episode 2 was so short. Well, now we know. So there you go. That's the wooden ladder restoration. Powder coating is coming up in the next episode of The Snake Pit. We took a break from that just to put this video together to give you the content you deserve. You take your time for me, and I feel that you deserve nothing but the very best. So everybody take care, be well, and we will see you in the next episode of The Snake Pit. Bye-bye.